be great to have some updates. So I want to introduce Alyssa Charney, who is the Chief of Staff with NRCS. So I think Greg mentioned, the role that NRCS can play in helping growers to implement some of these practices. And I also want to bring into the conversation Bidisha Bhattacharya, the Senior Advisor for USDA on farm production and conservation, and in particular, the emphasis and her expertise in climate and understanding how to respond to climate as farmers, and how does USDA shape their programs to be more responsive to that reality. So I want to, like I said, bring in Alyssa and just get some updates from starting with you on what's happening with NRCS and how growers need to be thinking about the opportunities here.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Great to see you and great to be here today. I think I'll just provide a couple quick updates in terms of what's happening at Send it over to Bidisha to give some updates on partnerships for climate smart commodities as well. At NRCS, it is definitely a really exciting time as we are moving forward with implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act, which among many important provisions and policies and funding for climate included an additional nearly $20 billion in NRCS's existing conservation tools. So that includes programs like the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, Conservation Stewardship Program, Regional Conservation Partnership Program, as well as Conservation Technical Assistance. So tools that are available through our local field offices that I am sure many folks are already familiar with. We are really excited about this historic investment. In addition to kind of knowing the significant climate benefits that practices like cover crops and no-till can provide, we also know that these programs are oversubscribed, that the demand for folks who are showing up, we just can't meet it with the funds that are currently available. So this is really exciting and a really huge opportunity for conservation, for climate, and we are quickly moving forward. I think you should see some announcements about our first year of funding coming out here pretty soon. So more to come there. We are also thinking very much about technical assistance. So how do we not only get these dollars out in the form of cost share, but actually help the farmers and ranchers get conservation practices on the ground? We're really thinking about partnerships. How do we leverage innovative partnerships to do that work? And then how do we make sure we can quantify the benefits? We can kind of make good on the promise and excitement that is there. And we are doing a lot, and Bidisha will touch here too, in terms of measurement, monitoring, verification, and reporting. The Inflation Reduction Act actually provided $300 million in funding specifically for this work to be able to tell this story. So more to come there as well. I know there are also questions that come up a lot in terms of how compatible are these tools that NRCS has with most carbon program enrollment opportunities. I think the short answer is very compatible, right? When we provide assistance in the form of financial or technical assistance for folks to get conservation on the ground, we have no stake in what happens next in terms of any additional market opportunities that folks want to pursue. And in fact, we have very clear direction to our field to make sure that kind of intersection and that coexistence is understood, because these opportunities are hugely complementary. We also have innovative projects where we're working with partners who are exploring a bit more in that market space, thinking about unique structures and opportunities there. But the short answer is very compatible. We want this to kind of be a stacking of opportunities and make sure, while we're not the ones kind of setting the market, we're not operating a market, we want to make sure that our tools are available and compatible. And always happy to make sure we're providing more there in terms of the guidance that's going out to the field on our end. I think just before turning it over to Bidisha, the other thing just that I was asked to hit upon was kind of what are the implications for farmers of all this funding that is coming through the Inflation Reduction Act. I think I hit on that in terms of the opportunities. We really are thinking about this not just in terms of, okay, we want to address the backlog, the unmet demand. That is very much part of it. We want to make sure that those good applications that have been coming in year after year that can't get funded. Now there's an opportunity to get funded. But at the same time, we're also thinking about how do we bring new folks in the door? How do we make sure that underserved communities, customers who we haven't been able to reach are coming in? So that's going to look like new partnerships, new outreach strategies to make sure we're reaching those producers with this really historic investment of additional funding. I think you might also see some streamlining of our processes. We know that this is a historic amount of money, which also means that it's going to be a really heavy lift to make sure we can get it out the door effectively, efficiently. So be on the lookout for ways that we are kind of trying to cut through some of those complicated application processes, cut down on some of that time that folks need to be waiting, and really just make this process more efficient, more effective to get folks the conservation, financial, and technical assistance that they're looking for. So I think with that, I will hand it over to Badisha to keep us going. Thanks.
Thanks, Alyssa. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I think Alyssa covered a lot of kind of where our heads are at. And we're operating in an environment right now where it is very, very clear both that farmers and ranchers are on the front lines of feeling the impacts day to day of climate change, and that there also, is an immense power in the sector and among producers to be able to actually be part of the solution. And so everything we're doing right now is in thinking about how to provide opportunities, expand markets for producers to be able to become, both more climate resilient and be part of the climate mitigation story. I think it's a very, very important part of the overall strategy. So I'll speak a little bit about an opportunity that we stood up last year called Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. So we looked across, did a lot of listening and public input, and heard a lot from folks on some of the needs and the opportunities that are in the sector. Consumers, companies. There's an immense demand for and growing demand and interest in kind of, how can food and what I buy be climate smart for corporations saying, how do we kind of achieve climate targets in our supply chains? And so there's a lot of interest out there, which translates into an immense market opportunity. But there was also a need that we found that there was a need to kind of address systematically some of the key barriers and challenges that were happening. And so after doing a lot of listening, we stood up and put out a funding opportunity last year for Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities. And we got immense interest. So we got over $20 billion worth of proposals. We initially had put $1 billion out as part of the opportunity, and the secretary looked at the demand and the quality and said, we gotta do more. So we ended up at over $3 billion of projects that were selected, and they're now going through negotiations to finalize those grant agreements so we can get those underway this year. So, I think in terms of the producers who are listening in today, we're really excited to get you all plugged into these projects. They are happening in real time, these negotiations, to get those agreements hammered out, and we're really hopeful and excited to get those happening this year. There's 141 projects covering every single state and territories as well, so there's going to be a lot of opportunity, very, very diverse mix of commodities. So we're really looking forward to a lot of the involvement as those start ramping up this year. I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about why the projects are how they are. So each of the projects covers sort of three main buckets of activities. One, and very, very important, is supporting producers in adopting climate smart practices. And that's really to help de-risk, understanding that these are oftentimes kind of major changes to the way that folks do things, and you want to make sure that there's support for that transition. One, and Alyssa touched on this as well, we've heard a lot about the need for USDA to play a role in helping on the measurement of the greenhouse gas benefits of these practices for agriculture, as well as the monitoring and verification to make sure that those reductions are actually happening. And so each project has a different, innovative way to do that, because we're testing these as pilots to see what works, what doesn't. And then finally, marketing. This is an effort to expand markets for climate smart commodities for producers. And so to do so, each project has to have a marketing plan and component to actually get the commodities to market. And they're pilot projects, so they're all going to do things in different ways. There's going to be a learning network set up, and we're going to be reporting out publicly the learnings from this effort. And I think it's going to dovetail really nicely with the implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act, as we can see what works, what doesn't, help feed a lot of that into kind of our flagship work that Alyssa spoke to. So this is all sort of under one big umbrella. And I think a lot of the measurement, monitoring, verification work that gets into some very interesting questions around data and verification are going to help the entire sector. And that's an area that I think a lot of folks are really excited about. So we're excited to see where that goes and report out there as well. I will stop there and turn it back to you, Ryan.
Awesome. Well, thank you both, Alyssa and Vidisha. To me, it's encouraging, one, the role that NRCS plays and seeing that increase in opportunity for growers to find that cost share. I've personally had an EQIP and a CSP contract. They've been very helpful for me in my learning and be able to implement some of these practices. And certainly with the climate smart projects going forward, to me, that's a signal like NRCS and USDA putting their horsepower behind figuring out a lot of questions and answering a lot of questions so that we as producers can go forward with a lot more confidence that this in fact is the right path. This is the right strategy. This is how I applied this particular technique. So thank you both for those updates. And it's encouraging to hear that. So thanks for sharing, and thanks again for joining us today.